The cafeteria froze in shock as a group of bullies stomped and crushed a disabled girl's wheelchair, unaware that her military brother had just walked in. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual noise, clattering trays, laughter, the hum of voices blending into a single roar. But then the roar shifted into something darker. At one corner, a group of boys gathered, their whispers sharpened into cruelty. All eyes turned toward a fragile wheelchair, one that had carried more strength than anyone in the room realized. With a sudden shove, metal screeched against tile, and in one brutal moment, it collapsed under their stomping feet. The girl's world tilted into silence. But what none of them knew, her brother had just come home from military duty, and he was watching. Her name was Alicia, 17 years old, bright-eyed, with a laugh that could make even the quietest corners feel alive. She had been born with a spinal condition that left her unable to walk, but she never allowed her chair to define her. To her friends, she was the girl who always brought snacks to study sessions, the one who stayed up late helping others review for tests. But to some, her chair was a target, an excuse to treat her as less than whole. The school she attended wasn't known for kindness. Cliques ruled the halls, and those who didn't fit into the glossy mold of popularity often found themselves swallowed by whispers or cruel stares. For Alicia, most days were manageable. She rolled past the whispers, ignored the stares, and carried herself with a quiet resilience. Yet, every so often, the cruelty surfaced more openly. Her brother, Marcus, was the complete opposite. Tall, broad-shouldered, disciplined, a soldier who had left for military service just after her freshman year. In his absence, Alicia had grown tougher, learning to shield herself without ever showing cracks. But deep down, she longed for the days when Marcus's presence was enough to silence bullies with just a look. The day it happened, the cafeteria smelled of overcooked pizza and faint bleach. Students crowded the tables, but Alicia sat near the edge, balancing her tray carefully. She was tired from the morning's classes, but her spirit was steady, until shadows fell across her table. The boys she had avoided all semester had cornered her. Smirks stretched across their faces, fueled by arrogance as they looked at her chair, not her. And in that moment, the unthinkable began. It started with words, as it often did. One boy leaned closer, his voice dripping mockery as he asked how fast her wheels could go. Another chimed in, pretending to push an imaginary chair, while the others laughed. Alicia's hands trembled slightly, but she kept her eyes down, refusing to give them the satisfaction of reaction. But silence to bullies was fuel. The more she ignored, the bolder they became. One of them tugged at the handle of her chair, jerking it suddenly. Her tray rattled, juice spilling across the table, staining her books. Gasps rippled through nearby students, but no one moved. "Leave me alone," she whispered, barely audible. The leader of the group grinned and with a swift motion shoved the chair backward. Alicia's body jolted as the wheel skidded across the tile. Her heart pounded, breath shallow, but she held on to the armrests, refusing to cry. She wouldn't give them that power. Then came the sound. Metal grinding, snapping, twisting under the weight of cruel intent. One boy stomped on the footrest until it bent inward. Another kicked at the wheels. The chair shuddered, fragile against the storm of destruction. Within seconds, the very thing that carried her independence was reduced to a broken frame. The cafeteria fell into a hushed tension. Some students looked away, pretending not to see. Others watched in frozen horror. Not one adult was present in that moment, and not one student had yet found the courage to intervene. Alicia's chest tightened. Without her chair, she felt trapped, stripped of the one tool that gave her freedom. Her books were soaked, her tray overturned, and her body trembled, helpless against the violence. The humiliation burned hotter than the fear. But as the bully sneered, Basking in their cruelty, none of them noticed the figure who had stepped into the cafeteria doorway. Marcus had returned home that morning, his uniform still crisp from travel, his boots heavy with the silence of discipline. He had come straight to see his sister, planning to surprise her with a quiet lunch. Instead, he arrived to find her wheelchair reduced to twisted metal and her body shaking in its ruins. His eyes, trained by years of service, took in the scene with piercing clarity. The smirks, the shattered frame, his sister's trembling hands. And then the soldier in him stepped forward. The moment Marcus's boots hit the cafeteria floor, the atmosphere shifted. His presence was sharp, commanding, like a storm rolling in without warning. The bullies froze, their laughter faltering as their eyes traced upward to the towering figure that now loomed behind them. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. His silence was heavier than thunder. Every step he took toward them echoed through the cafeteria, a drumbeat of authority that made even the bystanders catch their breath. He stopped just inches from the ringleader. His shadow swallowed him whole. His gaze was ice, carved with the discipline of a man who had seen battles far beyond petty cruelty. The bullies shifted, their arrogance cracking under the weight of his stare. For the first time, fear flickered in their eyes. One boy stammered an excuse, another backed away, but Marcus remained still, unyielding. He knelt beside his sister, steadying her trembling hands, lifting her gently from the wreck of the chair. His movements were tender, protective, the complete opposite of the violence that had just unfolded. And in that contrast, the cafeteria witnessed what true strength looked like. When Marcus finally rose, his voice carried low but unshakable. He didn't address just the bullies, he addressed the entire room. Though his words were calm, they cut sharper than any blade. Cruelty had no place here. He made it clear his sister was not alone, and neither was anyone else who ever felt targeted. The bullies, now pale and shrinking, were escorted out by staff who had finally rushed in. But the silence that followed wasn't one of relief, it was one of reflection. Every student had just witnessed a line being drawn, not only by a brother, but by a soldier who embodied protection. And Alicia, though shaken, sat taller in that moment, not because of her brother's shadow, but because she knew she carried his strength within her too. In the days that followed, the incident spread across the school like wildfire. For once, whispers weren't about cruelty. They were about courage, about the line that had been crossed and the stand that had been taken. Teachers tightened their watch. Students who once stayed silent began speaking up, and the bullies who once ruled with arrogance now walked with heads lowered, stripped of their power. Alicia's chair was replaced, but more importantly, her spirit was no longer weighed down by isolation. Her peers began to see her not as the girl in the chair, but as the girl who had survived cruelty and stood taller because of it. Some even apologized, quietly admitting they should have stepped in sooner. Marcus returned to his duties weeks later, but the impact of that single afternoon lingered long after he left. The cafeteria that once echoed with laughter at her expense now carried an unspoken rule of respect. But the lesson stretched far beyond school walls. Racism, discrimination, and cruelty often thrive in silence, in the moments when bystanders choose to look away. That day, Marcus showed everyone that silence could be shattered, not with violence, but with presence, with unwavering courage, with the choice to stand firm when others falter. And maybe that's the question we're all left with. If you witnessed cruelty unfold before your eyes, would you stay silent, or would you step forward like Marcus did and become the strength someone else desperately needs? Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage can rewrite someone's entire story.